Tell us about EZDRM. How did you get started?
Well, the quick version is we are a hosted, managed DRM-as-a-Service company, offering the three primary DRM technologies: PlayReady, Widevine, and Fairplay, in a cloud API-driven solution. So we, like a lot of other companies, started out with just two people having an idea.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea in 2001 was to do a streaming service,
Mm-hmm.
which, as you can imagine, in 2001, with two, let's face it, kids with no contacts in the industry, it failed miserably. But the idea revolved around a technology. It revolved around the DRM technology. And at some point, when we realized that we were failing and this wasn't going to go anywhere, we pivoted. And we decided that since we have the technology, why not do a company that can do the technology? We don't need the content. We don't need to do the customer management or anything else. We can just do the one thing we know how to do, is the DRM technology. And at that point, Microsoft had this beautiful Windows Media DRM technology that we licensed, and that's kind of where it went from there. We launched in January of 2003, and we launched on a premise of software as a service, or as we later coined the term, DRM-as-a-Service. And we've been running in roughly the same format ever since then. And we built our reputation on the idea of simplifying and demystifying the technology. We genuinely believe in forward-facing and simple pricing and friendly and efficient support. And that's kind of how we've been going since 2003.
That's an amazing foundation. It's fascinating to hear you got started in 2001. I can only imagine that streaming back then. I was involved in the web at the same time. It was about this big, or that's really interesting.
My business partner David talks about the fact that he goes, the idea was that the video is going to be this big, and tomorrow it's going to be this big, and then it's going to get a bit bigger, and eventually you will get full screen like we have today.
Right, 19 years later, right?
Let's not talk about that number, shall we?
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting also, so DRM, if I'm not mistaken, digital rights management. So it's all of like watermarking. Like, what are the elements that go into DRM in terms of like what's modern DRM like?
Well, modern DRM, there are three different technologies. Well, the three primary different technologies. There's PlayReady from Microsoft, there is Widevine from Google, and there is Fairplay from Apple. But the basic underlying idea is to basically allow or prevent playback of content. Watermarking is its own separate technology, but DRM itself basically answers the question of, can I play back this content, yes or no? And if I can, what are my rules or restrictions? Can I play this over this type of output, or can I allow the license and the content to be, or not the content, but the license to be downloaded, available offline, and things like that.
That's interesting. I imagine it's super, super complicated, given sort of a cat and mouse game of like features that have come out over the years. How did you get involved in the AWS and the cloud space specifically?
Well, when we launched in 2003 in our current format, we actually launched as a cloud service. The idea back then was that we launched two parts to the DRM puzzle, as I like to say. On the encoding side, we give you, at that point, a DRM profile. In today's world, it's encryption keys. And on the licensing side, we provide you basically the DRM rules to the license, or the options for DRM rules to the license, and we issue out the license when you tell us to. So it is basically down to two very simple APIs, and it has been since day one. So that's kind of was our cloud offering from day one, and we kind of stuck to it. Well, you mentioned 2003, and as a company that bet on the cloud way back when from the start,
Mm-hmm.
partnering with a company like AWS, which is such a major force in the cloud space, if you will, was a completely inevitable situation. Well, we as a DRM provider work with the AWS Media Services Group, and the Speak API that we utilize works with the AWS Media Convert and Media Live products. In this partnership, it's not just, an exchange of logos on the website, because, that happens too oftentimes. It is actual work that went behind this, and with integration and testing and an exchange of ideas of what would make sense and what would be simple and straightforward for a customer to use. Because at the end of the day, we all do this for our customers. Otherwise, why bother doing any of this?
Yeah.
And it's actually interesting. We had somebody who switched from a different architecture to an AWS EZDRM solution, followed the documentation that we created, set up their infrastructure using the Speak API, which is an AWS server, packager, encoder, key exchange thing API. And after about 4 days, this gentleman contacts us and says, I did this, this, and this. It works. What do I do now? We're like, you're done. He's like, I don't understand. It took 3 days or 4 days. Why was it so simple?
Yeah.
Like, because that's how, in the cloud, that's how we designed it. The idea is to be simple and straightforward and easy to implement. He's like, I'm not fully sure it's all done, because with the previous infrastructure, it took so much longer.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So he goes, and I never really got that done. But that's the idea behind this whole, two great cloud companies get together and create a solution that just works, that is scalable, and that is straightforward, and allows for, pretty much instant startup. It's wonderful.
And what do you think the impact of cloud will be on business over the next 3 years?
Well, I think it's kind of funny. I think everything's going into the cloud. And we do, to this point, still have clients who say, hey, can we do your service on-prem? Well, why do you want to do it on-prem? And different companies have different logic and different reasons, but most of them believe in the fact that it's more secure, it's more stable, it's more whatever. But the cloud technology in and of itself allows you so many more benefits compared to an on-prem solution. The ability to scale up and down whenever you have more or less usage of your services, the redundancy that you get with multiple POPs all over, a geographic location, or in our case, the world, the cost. I mean, the basic simple things like today, if you use, and that's kind of how we structure our services too. If you use, this much, you pay for this much. But if all of a sudden you produce a great show and everybody wants to see it, you pay for the stuff that you use, and you don't have to worry about all of a sudden getting servers up and worrying about any of the infrastructure that you need to worry about.
Yeah, with the global distribution today, it's anybody's guess in terms of who's actually going to be taking off and who's not. It's interesting.
Also, with the global distribution, you have a lot lower latency, be it for sports or for whatever else, because you get your content faster, you get your DRM licenses faster, and latency, as we all hear, low latency, it's actually very, very important, especially in like the world of sports or live events or what have you.
Oh yeah, and in terms of latency and how that relates to DRM, is that like a particular has that changed recently in terms of like either demand or technology for delivering?
Well, DRM in the grand scheme of things has nothing to do with latency.
Uh-huh.
In I'm going to say in a properly built environment, because the license request comes from the player. And as the person presses play to view the content, that's when the license request gets kicked off.
Yeah.
And while the player itself downloads the first few chunks of the content, the,
Mm-hmm.
the properly built player has the ability to multitask and go talk to the DRM service, grab a license, and come back. And by the time there's enough chunks to start streaming the content, the license is already there.
Yeah.
So latency is completely, totally, moot point to us, because, a license delivery process is what, a second at most?
Mm-hmm.
You're good to go.
Yeah, not much in that packet, I imagine.
No.
Sort of a yes you can or no you can't.
Well, there's a couple of other things to it, but pretty much yes, play or no, don't play.
What are the other elements to that? I'm curious.
You can control output protection levels. You
Mm-hmm.
can control, oh gosh, whether or not you can cast or air cast or whatever.
Oh, like
Um,
to send it to TV or something like
yeah,
that?
if you
Oh,
can,
how
you can
interesting.
control whether or not like an older monitor can play it or not, and things like that. And there's also the ability to just download the license itself and play content offline.
So when you say you can control whether an older monitor can play it back or not, is that like to preserve the quality or like the experience? What's the logic behind that?
You can also put in devices to steal content, and
Oh, I
that
see.
was at certain points with certain different older monitors, you can kind of have a man in the middle from the laptop to the monitor, where you
Oh,
can actually pull content.
that's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, we've worked with a lot of entertainment companies, and DRM has come up. Anytime you're talking about distribution over the internet, and there's so many things that if you're not in it, I suppose you just don't have exposure to. That seems very, very edge case, but critical, because if you have even one entry point, then cat's out of the bag.
Well, we do spend a lot of our time doing education
Mm,
of what can be done and what should be done, because we feel that if our customers understand what can be done,
yeah,
um, they have a lot more freedom to say, I want to do this, this, and this. But also, I feel like a lot of there are, the industry went through so many changes that the industry is like, people are just trying to figure out what DRM really is,
yeah.
and they think it's way harder than what it is.
Mm,
Um, and as I said, at some point I said, we try to demystify and simplify DRM so people understand it's not this scary beast that you need to kind of have all this stuff implemented for, but it can be done pretty straightforward and
yeah.
pretty simple.
Well, now that it's in the cloud, and now that we have you to lean into from an expertise standpoint. So, speaking of the cloud, are there any other technologies, other than yours, that either you've read about or you've heard about recently that you find interesting?
Honestly, I've been, well, given the whole COVID and working 12 plus hours a day,
Mm,
I haven't really gotten into reading about a lot of the specifics,
yeah.
but I do find it interesting how a lot of things that used to be so monolithic,
Hmm.
and you would expect to be monolithic, are all going into the cloud. And I think it has to do with every single aspect of the media and entertainment industry, and on the streaming side as well as on the content creation side.
Hmm.
Um, but anything within our little security bubble of watermarking and whatnot, everything is going in the cloud, which is, I guess, kind of more of a, you know proving to us then what the decision we picked in 2003 was actually the right one.
Hmm. I'm curious in terms of, you mentioned the media and entertainment industry. That's certainly a huge part of our customer base. Um, And I'm just now realizing that DRM probably goes beyond media and entertainment, although I would imagine that's the largest portion of it.
Well, it is actually interesting how it's been different the
Mm,
last few months.
yeah.
Um, I mean, other than the whole working 12-hour days plus, we see a lot more demand from educational organizations,
Oh, yeah.
especially with everybody going, oh, well, now that I'm home, let me learn something. Um,
Right.
so a lot of
The,
educational,
the, the good people, the other people are just streaming as much media as they can, but
sure.
the motivated people are trying to learn something.
Or at some point you got tired of watching TV and now you think you should probably do something productive with your life, right?
Right.
But education, a lot of it is going online,
Mm,
with schools trying to figure out what to do, universities,
yeah.
as well as just your overall, learn how to, do medical procedures and anything that you can possibly think of that could have
Mm,
been done in-house and in person is now
yeah.
being done online, and people are more concerned about content being stolen.
Yeah.
Um, because you steal enough content, you can throw up your own website and go crazy, right?
Yeah.
The other thing we see a lot more of is enterprise video. And if beforehand you can have a hands-on, everybody on deck kind of a meeting, now things are more secure and people are more spread out, and you can't really have a CEO do a speech like a town hall type of situation for the company and have it
Yeah.
get out. So things like that need to be protected.
Yeah.
And not to mention live sports and the whole situation with them trying to figure out what's going to happen with sports and everything else.
Well, you've totally anticipated the next question around and the last question, which is around the impact of the coronavirus on the media and entertainment industry. But it sounds like you're going way beyond M&E and talking about all sorts of interesting industries that, because of that transformation, that digital shift, that everybody's having to think about DRM right now. Do you think this is going to be a long lasting? Is this a new normal? What do you think the impact of coronavirus will be over the next 12 months?
Well, I think with everybody, I mean, you hear a lot of companies say, well, we'll be working from home until 2021 or for the
Yeah.
next year. Or, I mean, I have friends who say I'm working from home permanently now.
Mm,
Um, I think it gives people a lot of flexibility as to whether or not they want to go in the office as far as just, the overall working perspective of it. But it's also creating a lot of situations where information needs to be shared, and
yeah.
oftentimes it's video, and it has to get protected. I mean, from our perspective, it has to get protected, because if it's not secure, then somebody might steal it. Somebody might get an idea that they, get ahead when it's your idea.
Yeah.
So I think as much as whatever's happening now is changing the industry in general, I think it's going to stay. And if
Hmm.
people go through the motions of implementing all the security, that they're going to stick to it because they're going to see the benefits to it in the long run.
Well, Olga, it's been an absolute pleasure. And if anybody wants to contact you over at EZDRM, who would be the best person to reach out to?
Well, I think the easiest way to get a hold of us is just go to our website,
Hmm.
EZDRM.com, and we have a form that says contact me. So you can fill that out. You'll get a response back pretty quickly. Or if you prefer sitting down and actually writing an email, simplify at EZDRM.com is the best way to go.